The early morning sky over Tehran was bruised with violet streaks, an uneasy silence cloaking the city just before the strike. Thousands remained unaware that, 30 minutes earlier, an Israeli drone had pierced Iranian airspace. It wasn't a conventional drone. This was Spectre class, silent, stealth-equipped, AI-controlled, and lethal. At the helm of this operation, from a dim-lit subterranean bunker beneath Tel Aviv, was Commander Eli Raz, eyes flickering under a green glow as satellite telemetry fed into his retinal overlay. "Target 2 is stable. Begin Phase 3, he said calmly, adjusting his neural uplink. His voice echoed through the war room like a scalpel, precise, unemotional. He had spent 6 years building the AI infiltration protocol, a masterpiece of cyber warfare designed not just to attack, but to deceive. And today, deception was the entire strategy. 2,000 kilometers east, General Rostam Karimi stood inside Iran's fortified complex in Kermanshah, drinking scalding black tea. On the monitor, routine surveillance blinked with unread urgency. The supreme leader, Sadegh Javanmardi, was in his private chamber below, surrounded by data terminals, secure lines, and relics of past revolutions. To him, war wasn't a looming event. It was prophecy. In Tel Aviv, Operation Flame Curtain was proceeding faster than expected. 3 Spectre drones had already bypassed Iran's outer SAM perimeter using quantum cloaking algorithms that tricked enemy radar into perceiving blue sky. Commander Raz's interface showed synchronized blips diving toward a heat signature buried 70 meters underground, the Supreme Leader's vault, previously thought impervious. But Raz wasn't after Javanmardi's death. That would make him a martyr. No. This was about destabilization, wounding the body of leadership while leaving its voice erratic and gasping. That was the point of impact. Inside the bunker, sensors began howling. A sudden seismic rumble rippled through the complex, forcing Karimi to drop his cup. The lights flickered. Dust fell in fine curtains from the concrete ceiling. Below, a detonation like a god's fist punched the armored vault. The reinforced steel bent, but didn't give. Still, several adjacent systems were fried. Communication lines blinked out. A server array burst into sparks. The Supreme Leader survived. Barely. Blood streamed from a gash above his brow, his turban torn. But what shook him wasn't the pain. It was the realization that his enemies had touched his sanctum, defiled the space he once believed untouchable. He clenched his jaw, then smiled grimly. "Activate Project Firecaller," he whispered to an aide, who froze in place, his fingers trembling over the terminal. Above-ground chaos took form. Rumors spread before facts. The Iranian military's official feed was jammed, replaced by loops of distorted static. Citizens uploaded shaky videos, flashes on the horizon, columns of smoke, whispers of war. In Western media, headlines bloomed like fire. Israel executes surgical strike on Iranian command bunker. Back in Tel Aviv, Raz stood motionless as intelligence streamed in. The Supreme Leader lived, just as planned. But in the quiet that followed, his instincts screamed. Javanmardi wouldn't retaliate conventionally. No, this man, cornered, humiliated, would consider the unthinkable. Raz turned to his second-in-command. "Prep intercept protocols," he ordered. "He's going to bring the whole theater down." Meanwhile, inside Iran's deep-state war room beneath Esfahan, nuclear keys were being dusted off. General Karimi had protested once, but now he stood complicit, unable to stop what was already moving. Inside her laboratory, Dr. Farah Darien felt her pulse quicken as security agents sealed the doors. She knew what this meant. Her synthetic isotopes, once meant for energy purification, had been reassigned. The code she wrote would now ignite warheads designed not just for Israel, but to cauterize its very memory. As she opened her encrypted terminal, a whisper of doubt passed through her mind. The Supreme Leader's words from the prior month echoed, "To silence one enemy, sometimes you must make the world go deaf." And now, silence was ending. The sun over Esfahan had not risen above the rooftops when Dr. Farah Daryan found herself locked inside her lab, no longer a scientist, but a tool. The code she'd written, an autonomous targeting algorithm, was designed to minimize civilian harm in high-yield detonations. That's what she had told herself. That's what she had told the committee. Now she saw the revised orders in her feed, traced in cryptic red over her interface. The coordinates weren't military. They were urban: Haifa, Tel Aviv, Ashdod. Her chest tightened. Across Iran's Central Command, General Rostam Karimi stood at the edge of a digital war map. Dozens of strategic nodes glowed in shifting hues. All around him, technicians whispered, the mood brittle and electric. Javan Mardi had issued the final, instruction hours earlier, bypassing the military hierarchy. Project Firecaller had been fully activated. Iran's nuclear delivery systems, those whose existence Tehran had long denied, were now primed and awaiting a single cipher to unlock deployment. Karimi had dedicated his life to defending the Republic. But this wasn't defense. This was vengeance dressed as divinity, and his face betrayed it. Every twitch, every silence, betrayed doubt. He watched the stream of live intelligence from the strike site. Israeli teams had not stayed to finish the job. That itself, he noted grimly, was a message. We could have taken everything, but we didn't. Meanwhile, in Tel Aviv, Commander Eli Raz sat alone in a private chamber beneath the Ministry of Defense. He had reviewed the same footage 30 times. The strike, the subterranean breach, the flicker of movement suggesting Javan Mardi's survival. He knew what it meant. They had achieved their operational goal, but missed the strategic one. The lion had been wounded, not slain. And now, wounded, it was unpredictable. Raz wasn't a politician, but he understood political behavior better than most. The Supreme Leader wasn't just preparing to retaliate. He was trying to force history to remember him. A final act of defiance, not to win, but to ensure no one could forget his rage. Outside, Israel had gone into silent mobilization. Anti-air batteries were active. Schools were shut. Reserve units called up. Civil defense sirens had not yet sounded, but the country hummed with tension. In cafes, people whispered. In synagogues, prayers thickened. Everyone knew what came next. They just didn't know when. Leah Anderson, U.S. envoy to the Middle East, landed in Amman under cover of night, escorted by a phalanx of armored jeeps. She hadn't slept. Her messages to Moscow and Beijing had been terse, desperate. If Iran launched, there would be no measured retaliation. Israel's Samson doctrine ensured that much. And unlike past brinkmanship, this time neither side seemed inclined to blink. She met with Jordanian intelligence chiefs, trying to establish back-channel communication with moderate elements in the Iranian government. But every conversation ended the same way. We don't know who is in control anymore. And that was the most terrifying truth. Inside her lab, Farah stared at the blinking interface. She could stop it. She had left a back door. A single pulse through the correct data node would override the launch sequence, but it would also betray her. Her family, still under state protection, would disappear. She would be marked a traitor. But what was loyalty worth in a world buried beneath radioactive ash? She placed her hand on the biometric scanner. In the control chamber, General Karimi watched as one of the nuclear readiness indicators dimmed for exactly 6 seconds before returning to active green. A flicker of doubt. A ghost in the system. He stared hard at the line of code, then at the silent men and women around him. No one else noticed. He said nothing. In the Tel Aviv bunker, Raz received the same signal, a 6-second drop. He didn't know who was responsible or what it meant, but something inside him, a long dormant whisper of intuition, told him it wasn't a glitch, it was a message. He picked up a secure line and called the Prime Minister. "They're hesitating," he said. "Someone in there wants this stopped." "Can they?" came the reply. Raz paused. "I think they already did. Or they're trying." The line went dead. Farah sat motionless, staring at her reflection in the terminal glass. A second command prompt blinked at her. "Do you wish to proceed with lockout override? Y or N?" Her finger hovered. Outside, the early evening call to prayer echoed across Esfahan's rooftops. Below, in the deepest vault of the Iranian nuclear facility, code began to rewrite itself. Slowly, quietly. The countdown wasn't halted, but it was no longer certain. She pressed Y, and then the screen went black. Above, General Karimi stepped back from the console. Without a word, he walked into his private chamber and shut the door. Silence reigned. Something had shifted. The desert wind howled across the ruins of what once had been a hardened missile silo outside Natanz. Above the rubble, the sun cast a pale orange hue, but below ground, where the surviving fragments of Iran's nuclear command had hidden, everything was lit by cold emergency light. In that dimness, Ayatollah Javanmardi stirred. The oxygen tanks hissed softly. His pulse was slow, shallow, but steady. A medic leaned over, uncertain if he should alert the other guards. The Ayatollah's hand rose weakly and caught the medic's wrist. "Wait!" he rasped. The supreme leader was alive. Word reached General Karimi within minutes. He didn't flinch when they told him. Deep down, some part of him had known this wouldn't end in one blow. He stood by the window of the underground military command post, watching the encrypted data feeds scroll. What he didn't expect was the next order. It wasn't about retaliation. It was a summons. Javanmardi wanted to see him, alone. Faradarian had vanished. Her biometric override had been logged, but no trace of her remained. Her terminal had been wiped remotely, her escape routes sealed before anyone could question her. In Tel Aviv, analysts were still trying to determine if the 6-second anomaly had been sabotage or malfunction. Only Raz was convinced it was neither. He felt it in his bones. It had been a plea for time. Raz was now meeting with NATO's forward analysts, the Americans, and Britain's cyber warfare division. They were preparing countermeasures not just for missiles, but for something more insidious: mass disinformation, global panic, AI-driven economic collapse. The retaliation, if it came, would not be a mushroom cloud. It would be chaos, precision-engineered, deniable, and spread in layers until the truth itself drowned. Karimi entered the hidden vault alone. The guards parted without a word. Inside, Javanmardi lay propped up against reinforced bedding, an IV in his arm, a breathing machine beside him. He looked older, not just physically. Something had hollowed him. Still, his eyes burned. "Do you think I'm mad?" he asked. Karimi did not respond. "I saw it all," Javanmardi continued. "The bunker shook, but it didn't collapse. I was supposed to die. They wanted me to die. Even my own staff expected it. But here I am, alive. You think that's coincidence?" Karimi finally answered, "No. But survival doesn't mean vindication." The Ayatollah laughed, a dry rattle. "You're always the rationalist, Rostam, the soldier, the planner. You never understood symbols." Karimi stepped forward, his voice low. "This war doesn't need symbols. It needs restraint. The West has shown its teeth. We should answer with strength, yes, but not with suicide." Javanmardi's eyes flared. "You forget what martyrdom means." Karimi leaned closer, lowering his voice further. "You forget what survival means." The two men locked eyes. It was not an argument. It was a reckoning. Karimi had come prepared. In his pocket was a device, a failsafe created years ago for use only if the regime turned on its own. A last line of loyalty, not to power, but to the nation itself. In a bunker under Tel Aviv, Raz watched the screen. A new signal had emerged. A lockout sequence initiated from deep within Iranian command. But not from Farah. This time, it was military. A hard override. Someone had decided to prevent the final launch. Back in Natanz, Javan Mardi's voice was barely audible. "If you do this, it will break the old guard." Karimi nodded. "Then let it break." He tapped the device. Thousands of kilometers away, nuclear readiness indicators across Iran flickered and dropped to passive. All launch systems were rendered inert. The codes were gone, permanently erased from the internal servers. In silence, the supreme leader closed his eyes. Karimi turned and walked out. He did not wait for approval. Farah, somewhere across the Caspian Sea, sat in a small tea house beneath a worn tarp. She watched the news quietly on a flickering screen. The world hadn't ended, yet. But something far more rare had occurred. Sanity had interrupted prophecy. In Tel Aviv, Raz closed his notebook. "It's over," he said aloud to no one in particular. Or at least, this chapter is. But history never sleeps. And somewhere, in the silence after the sirens faded, new shadows began to gather.